4 levels of perception. Earth keepers learn to experience events in such a way that they no longer take life personally, and they do so at the perceptual level of serpent. Here, things no longer happen to you, they simply happen. The pigeon doesn't poop on your car to make you upset, it simply poops and your windshield gets smeared. It doesn't rain on you to make you wet, it simply rains. When you change your perception of the events you experience, you also alter the way these situations live within you. You are no longer the cause or the effect of anything, and you sense a tremendous relief because the world is exactly as it should be, and it doesn't need you to fix it. In the West, we tend to associate our perception with the dozens of states of awareness we're familiar with. For example, we're in one mode of awareness when we're just waking up or drifting off to sleep, another when we're in reverie, another when we're enraged, and so on. In each one, a different part of the brain is active, so we refer to them as states of consciousness, which are products of the mind. Perceptual levels, on the other hand, exist independently of the mind. In fact, the second level of Jaguar, which we'll cover in a bit, contains the mind and all of its states of consciousness. There are 4 perceptual levels through which a Laika engages the world. These levels correspond to the 4 domains of manifestation of vibration and light: the physical world, our body, the realm of thoughts and ideas, mind, the realm of myth, soul, and the world of spirit, energy. These perceptual levels are associated with 4 energetic bodies that make up the human energy field. They're stacked inside each other like Russian nesting dolls, with the physical body innermost, the mental body enveloping and informing the physical shell, the soul enveloping the mental and physical, and the spiritual body outermost, informing and organizing them all like a blueprint. When we shift from one level of perception up to the next, we retain our ability to function at the lower realm, but we have a much wider view of what we're experiencing. I'm reminded here of an old story about a traveler who comes across 2 stonecutters. He asks the first, "What are you doing?" and receives the reply, "Squaring the stone." He then walks over to the second stonecutter and asks, "What are you doing?" And he receives the reply, "I am building a cathedral." In other words, both men are performing the same task, but one of them is aware that he has the choice to be part of a greater dream. Albert Einstein once said that the problems we face in life cannot be solved at which they are created. To that end, being able to shift to a higher realm of perception can help us find solutions to our problems, resolve conflicts, heal disease, and experience oneness with all of creation, whereas before we were only experiencing distress and separation. In this chapter, you'll learn that there's a spiritual solution to every problem you encounter in the physical world, in your mind, and in your soul. You'll learn that you can't eliminate scarcity in your life by getting another job, or heal feelings of abandonment or anger by understanding your childhood wounds. You can only fix these problems at the level above the one they were created in. The Laika associate each perceptual level with an animal that represents the powers and abilities one must acquire in order to influence reality in that realm. Each level also has its own language that we can become fluent in. Let's take a closer look at each of these levels now. The body and physical perception. The level of serpent. The serpent is an instinctual creature with extraordinary senses that it can rely upon to tell it where there's food and where there's a predator. Similarly, in the physical realm, we humans rely on our senses to give us a picture of ourselves and the world. This is a very material level of perception, where everything is tangible, solid, and difficult to change, where reality is 1% spirit and 99% matter. From the perception of serpent, we can see, touch, and even smell an object in front of us, such as a loaf of bread, and we know that it's there, physically present. We don't imagine the stalks of golden wheat in the bread, the kneading of the baker, or the fire that transformed it into a loaf we can eat. We only see an object that will satisfy our hunger. Similarly, we don't see sex as an act of love. We see it as a physical longing that will satisfy our desire. At the level of serpent, the language we use to depict reality is molecular and chemical. We could describe bread scientifically, calling it a food substance created from grain, yeast, and a few other ingredients, one that has a certain chemical makeup. We can also describe bread as a food, and we follow our instinct to eat it if we're hungry. Everything is as it seems. A loaf of bread is just that. A pigeon pooping is only that. When we see problems through the eyes of the serpent only, we try to come up with physical solutions. We want to change the job, trade in the car, find a new partner, or have an affair. If we feel a headache coming on, we label it a migraine and reach for some medication. If we see a child acting out in class, jumping out of his seat to start wrestling with a schoolmate, we label him naughty and punish him. Sometimes these solutions work, but often they're too simplistic. At Serpent, we rely totally on our instinctual senses and don't reflect more deeply on our problems. We're operating from that part of the brain we share with lizards and dinosaurs. That is, we're aware of our physical bodies, but we're not cognizant of our mental, creative, and spiritual selves. In this state, we perceive outer form and accept only the obvious, remaining blind to our feelings and those of others. We're devoid of rich, complex thinking and simply act and react. This state can be very useful for operating in the physical world. After all, we need to pay the bills, mow the lawn, and drive the kids to school without reading any more meaning into any of these actions. And as Sigmund Freud once famously remarked, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Remaining in Serpent, that is, putting one foot in front of the other, is especially helpful for getting us through immediate crises. Our reptilian brain is in charge, working from survival instincts, and we simply do what has to be done without wasting valuable energy thinking about it, analyzing it, or getting emotionally distraught about it. We all know how wearying it is to meet someone who refuses to function at this level, even when it's very practical to do so, choosing to read deep meaning into even the most trivial matters instead of just getting the work done. The instincts of Serpent are also very helpful because they can alert us to danger before we consciously perceive it. We get a quote-unquote bad vibe about a person or place and avoid it without knowing why. Or we sense that a police officer with a radar gun is up the road, so we take our foot off the gas pedal. Serpent is an essential state to master, as we have to be effective in the physical world and take care of business in a practical way. But when we allow our need to survive at all costs to dominate, we're not always so pleasant to be around. We reach for the most literal signs of security, such as having a big bank account and material toys. And we give in to greed, stinginess, and suspicion. We coil up and contract, striking out before the other guy can clobber us. We amass weapons and build fences. In fact, archaeologists excavating Neolithic sites have found that the earliest defenses built by humans weren't designed to protect them from physical enemies, but from the invisible ghouls and dangers they perceived from the state of serpent. Unfortunately, much of humanity has lived at the level of serpent for thousands of years. Many people who take the Bible and Quran literally, with their instructions to slay infidels, still live in this realm. It's important to be able to take our perception up a notch for the good of ourselves and our world, because serpent is the cold-blooded domain of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The mind and emotional perception, the level of Jaguar. In the next perceptual state, Jaguar, the mind interprets our reality. We recognize that the mind can create psychosomatic disease or restore health, that repressed anger can cause cancer, and that a positive attitude brings joy and peace to ourselves and others around us. We're aware that our experiences are influenced by our thoughts, and that everything isn't necessarily what it seems to be in the physical realm. Now, when we look at a loaf of bread, we know that it came from the fields of wheat and the baker, and we actually think about its many possibilities. We may choose to begin eating it, put it in the refrigerator and save it for later, or wrap it up and give it away to someone who is poor. We may add butter and garlic to it and bake it, or we may do something really unusual, such as tossing it across the room at someone and starting a food fight. But we've been taught certain beliefs about bread, and those beliefs influence our decision about what to do with it. We know that it's not right to waste food, so we quickly brush aside any temptation to throw it across the room just for fun. In short, we understand that we have choices, but we also know that those choices are limited by our beliefs about bread. We also comprehend the bread's symbolic meanings. We understand that it represents life, as in the bread of life. We use the expression white bread to denote a person who lacks dimension or personality, and we say, "I have no bread," to express a lack of money. A loaf of bread represents more than the satisfaction of our hunger, and having sex represents more than the satisfaction of our need. It can be an act of intimacy. The realm of beliefs, ideas, and emotions is associated with the Jaguar because this type of perception can suddenly transform situations, causing them to be seen in a new light. And such a creature is the archetype of sudden change. The Jaguar spots his prey and pounces on it, quickly extinguishing its life. Yet, this helps keep down the population of the other animals and maintain balance in the rainforest, thus making it possible for other life to thrive in the ecosystem. In the same way, a single insight can allow us to break free from our negative feelings or an old way of operating that's preventing us from moving forward. The jaguar's instincts are different from those of the serpent, which is solely concerned with survival and self-preservation. Jaguars are curious and inquisitive. Our cat instinct leads us to the right people and situations, or the wrong ones if our feline instinct is flawed. Jaguar perception is associated with a mammalian brain, that of emotion and deep feelings of love, intimacy, family, caring, and compassion. Yet, it's also the brain of aggression, superstition, amulets, charms, and Nostradamus and Genghis Khan. The language of the level of Jaguar is spoken or written words, which we use to form and express ideas, beliefs, and feelings. Here we understand symbols and signs, and can agree that certain sounds are words that mean something specific. From jaguar, we recognize that we can give a hungry man a fish, but a more practical, long-term solution is to teach him how to fish. We know that we can give a starving child a piece of bread, but we also know that one does not live on bread alone. We rise above the literal level and see a wider range of possibilities in any situation. If we have a migraine, we ask ourselves, what could be the cause? What is my body trying to tell me? Just as the mental level encases the physical, in jaguar, we incorporate what we experience at serpent state. So if we have a headache, we're aware of our pain, but we also think about whether we could have consumed something that might have caused it, such as chocolate or red wine. We consider whether the migraine is a symptom of another type of ailment. Maybe we're taking on more responsibilities than we can handle. Or perhaps we're worried about our business or a fight with our spouse, and the body is responding by creating a headache. Through the eyes of jaguar, we look at the child who is acting out in class and ask, is he actually unable to sit still and keep his hands to himself? And if so, why? We consider whether the child ate a lot of sugary treats and has a strong physical urge to move, if he's bored by what the teacher is saying, and so on. We're able to perceive much more about the situation than we would at serpent state. Consequently, we're able to think of many more solutions. We don't just punish the child who acts out. We make sure that he eats a healthy breakfast and has a chance to walk and run before he has to settle into his seat and focus on listening to the teacher. We don't just pop a pain pill. We learn to say no to our extra responsibilities and start expressing the anger we've been repressing. Because we have so many more possibilities, we're able to make effective changes and solve more complex issues. The soul and sacred perception, the level of hummingbird. The next domain of perception, which also encases the previous two levels, is that of the soul. The language of this level is image, music, poetry, and dreams. It's the realm of myth, where the soul can experience itself on a sacred journey, and is thus symbolized by hummingbird. Although tiny, this bird manages to navigate thousands of miles in its yearly migration from Canada to Brazil. It never loses its sense of direction or its drive to press forward, and never wonders if it has enough food or strength for its voyage. In the domain of the mythic, we are all like hummingbird, on a grand voyage and yearning to drink only from the nectar of life. When we don't perceive our journey as sacred, we become mired at the level of the mind and its complicated analysis of the world. From hummingbird, we perceive all of our experiences as part of an epic journey. The hummingbird perceptual state is associated with the neocortex, the most recent addition to the human brain. The neocortex evolved around 100,000 years ago and is responsible for our ability to reason, visualize, and create. It is the brain of Galileo and Beethoven, science, art, and mythology. At the soul level, solutions to problems that we can't solve with the mind suddenly become evident. In Peru a few years back, for instance, the native people had begun to perceive that the inexpensive, healthy, homemade, whole-grain bread that they'd been eating for generations was inferior to store-bought, heavily processed white loaves that they saw the wealthy eat. As a result, they were eating the less wholesome bread, and it was affecting the well-being of the population. The president of Peru could have tried to resolve this problem at the level of the mind and attempted to convince people through a public relations campaign that brown bread is good for you. Or he could have worked with the legislature to pass a law raising the taxes on white bread to try to force people to buy more affordable loaves. Instead, he chose to address the situation from the hummingbird level of perception. The president recognized that to the village people of his country, white bread had come to represent success and sophistication, while brown bread symbolized poverty and ordinariness. He knew he had to change their perception that white bread is better. So he made a television clip that showed him dining with his family in the presidential palace, eating brown bread. He knew that this would deliver the message that brown bread is the food of the successful and the sophisticated. And it worked. Indigenous people in Peru returned to eating brown bread because this was the bread of the kings, not peasants. When I eat at restaurants in Peru, I always load up my bag with extra rolls that are served because I know I'll have an opportunity to help someone out by giving them a roll that may be their only meal of the day. Once, when I was traveling with a Laika elder, I found myself in a bus station surrounded by several children who had gathered around me in the hopes that I might give them some coins or candy. I began to take the rolls out of my bag and distribute them, but the elder told me, "This is not the bread these children need. The kind of food my people need is the food of the soul, not the stomach." He took the rolls from me and distributed them to the children himself, but as he did, he also began telling them stories about their Inca ancestors. Afterward, the elder explained these stories are the nourishment that they are craving. I gave them not the bread that will feed them tonight, but the bread that will feed them throughout their entire lives. He was perceiving with the eyes of the hummingbird. To him, the stories were nourishment for the soul. When he saw me handing out rolls, he intervened at the level of the sacred by offering these children the mythology of their people. At the level of the soul, things are what they truly are, an expression of the sacred. A house is not simply a roof over your head, it's a home. A spouse is not merely a person you share a household and child-rearing duties with, but a chosen partner, a fellow traveler on a great journey. In this state, you look at bread and ask, am I hungry for bread? Or am I hungering for the nurturing it represents? You're able to understand the importance of breaking bread with others and how your belly can never be adequately filled when others go hungry in the world. At the level of hummingbird, we listen below the surface of conversations and hear their hidden messages. We operate in metaphors, so if we have a migraine, we ask ourselves, am I going out of my mind? What thoughts are stuck in my head? What is this a sign of? In Chinese medicine, unexpressed anger is said to reside in our liver. So if we have liver trouble, we know it can be a sign of our repressed rage. So if our liver function is sluggish, we ask, what medication can I take? But also, how can I practice forgiveness, both with myself and others? We understand illness to be the warning light that tells us there's something going on that needs our attention, and we don't treat the symptom alone. When we look through the eyes of hummingbird and see an overly active child, we ask, how is this child's problem a positive opportunity? We recognize that giving Ritalin to a hyperactive child may make him stay in his seat and focus on what the teacher is saying to him, but it takes away his natural ability to multitask. In a jungle, this child's problem, behavior, or learning deficit would actually be an asset. He would be able to hear the birds call to each other and the rushing of the waterfall and still engage in a conversation, all the while remaining alert to possible danger. In hummingbird, we perceive the child's distractibility as a gift that's invaluable for his soul's journey. At this level, we sense that we're all in a journey of growth and healing, making a trek back to where we were born to be, in a condition of divine well-being. If we experience a migraine, we ask ourselves, what kind of healing is this headache calling me to? It might be that we need to eat less chocolate, take medication, and stop putting ourselves through stress. It might also be that the way to cure our headaches involves a larger journey. Maybe we need to leave an unhappy relationship. Perhaps it's time to move away from a remote, rural area where we can't find work or create a sense of community. Or we might need to let go of our disappointment in our parents and our anger at them, along with our fear that we're becoming just like them. We fix the headache by mending the soul. We see paths that will lead us back to health, and we undertake a healing journey. Hummingbird is a much more commanding sphere for bringing about change than jaguar is. This is why visualization is so much more powerful than just reciting affirmations. When you want to ensure that your future holds a desirable outcome, you need to visualize it only once from the perceptual state of hummingbird. From jaguar, you would need to repeat the verbal affirmation dozens or perhaps even hundreds of times to achieve a similar result. Spiritual perception, the level of eagle. As the eagle soars above the valleys, he is able to visually take in the trees, the rocks, the river, and even the curvature of the earth. Yet, he's also able to spot a mouse 2,000 feet below him. His ability to see both the entire picture and a tiny piece of it at the same time are representative of the qualities of the level of spirit. In eagle, reality is 99% consciousness and 1% matter. There is little form or substance, and the language is energy. The brain associated with this level is the prefrontal cortex, which some neuroscientists call the God brain. In eagle, there is no longer a poor person receiving bread and a rich person handing it to him. There is only spirit nourishing spirit. We no longer perceive ourselves as disconnected from the planet or from other people. The boundaries melt away as our individual souls recognize our oneness. I call this the poof state, because at this level of perception, matter simply disappears. When we look at the hyperactive child, we see no illness or problems. There is simply God experiencing itself as a child. When you ask a Laika who she is, she'll tell you, the mountains am I, the river am I, the eagle am I, the rock am I. From jaguar, she may perceive herself as recovering from the loss of a loved one, but at eagle, she knows that she is God, masquerading as herself, so she endeavors to take up permanent residence at the heights of eagle. When we face a difficulty, the closer we can get to the level of spirit, the less energy we need to effect change. Downstream, we can see war, but upstream, we can see the unrest among the people that will carry us to war, which is a much easier problem to address. Downstream is pollution. Upstream is the question of why we're using plastic and throwing it on the ground. From hummingbird, we insist on recycling. From eagle, we question why we don't eliminate plastic packaging altogether. Downstream is our child having problems with the law or with relationships. Upstream is the question of how we're teaching him by example to relate to and respect others. At the lower levels of perception, we can try to figure out a way to prevent war or pollution, heal those who feel disenfranchised, or change those who insist on throwing away their garbage without recycling. But at the very highest level of eagle, we can actually become peace. We can become healing and beauty and embody the clean waters of a river. we stop perceiving a separation between us and our environment, or between us and other people. One way to understand this highest level of perception, where our traditional ideas about the nature of reality dissolve, is to look at quantum mechanics. Physicists are discovering that at the subatomic level, matter is far less solid and tangible than we once thought it was. In other words, a solid table isn't solid at all, but a buzzing collection of particles and waves. Werner Heisenberg was the first to befuddle physicists with this notion, postulating in his uncertainty principle that when we observe an electron to measure its speed, this changes its position. So if we expect an electron to behave as a particle, it obliges. If we design an experiment where it must behave as a wave and strike two side-by-side targets simultaneously, it cooperates. This discovery was deeply disturbing to many scientists, including Einstein, who exclaimed that God does not play dice with the universe. And yet, the Earth Keepers have always known that our perception of the world determines its very nature. In other words, quantum physicists and Earth Keepers both suggest that the world is dreaming itself into being. The squirrels are dreaming it, the fish are dreaming it, and we are dreaming it. Even the stones are dreaming it, although their slumber is deep and long. Quantum physics explains how it happens. The Laika tell us how to do it. Physics tells us how water evaporates into a cloud of vapor, while the Laika show us how to make it rain. Of course, we humans experience reality through our own perception, not that of the elk or stone. Some Laika were said to be able to shapeshift and become a jaguar or eagle, able to sense the vegetation brushing against them as they slinked through the jungle, or the wind rushing through their wings while soaring down into a valley. They did this to glimpse the world through the eyes of another, to discover whether there was a stream on the other side of the mountain or why the condors were becoming extinct. In physics, chaos theory explains that a tropical storm in the Caribbean could actually be caused by a butterfly in Beijing that flapped its wings. It's very difficult to change a Category 5 hurricane, or late-stage cancer, but Earth Keepers know that from Eagle we can cross time and find that hurricane while it's still a whisper of wind on the edge of a butterfly's wing. That is, we can heal that storm before it's ever born. This is the gift of this realm. There is no time, so we can change things before they come into existence. We can dream the world into being before energy ever acquires physical form. Using different levels of perception. While we're always capable of interacting with all four levels of perception, we're usually bogged down in the physical body, or at best, caught up in the sphere of psychology and the mind. We believe that we could cure our unhappiness if only we could find a suitable relationship, or that the reason we can't stay on a diet is that we didn't receive the right nurturing from our parents. Occasionally we're able to sense from Hummingbird and hear the call to our epic journey, but then Serpent drags us back and we think that we don't have enough money or time, or we slip into Jaguar and doubt whether we're strong or smart enough to walk the path. At Eagle, our power to affect reality is at its greatest. However, it takes courage and practice to shift into this high level of perception and stay there. The young Laika who were studying to become healers learn to diagnose and heal at the level of Hummingbird. They don't work physically on the body or psychologically on the mind. Instead, they learn to work with feathers, fire, and other tools that help them change the matrix of someone's luminous energy field. But the elders don't need to use a feather fan or herbs. They are working from Eagle, where objects and thoughts and even visual images aren't necessary. They can heal without even moving a finger, as their presence alone will suffice. In our own lives, we can use many tools to shift us into hummingbird perception, including meditation, prayer without words, music, and art. On a more superficial note, we can try dressing in vivid colors on a gray day to bring ourselves out of a depressive mood and into a brighter and more enthusiastic one. Or we can recite prayers, hoping that speaking the words will shift us into truly feeling them. Yet, at Eagle, we won't need a bright yellow shirt to make us feel energized and excited about the day, even though it's been overcast and rainy for weeks. We won't need the words of the prayer because we can easily shift into the experience of sensing the divine in hummingbird and becoming one with spirit in eagle. The shift happens within us. Shifting to a higher level of perception. When we get stuck in the perceptual landscape of serpent and jaguar, we spend a lot of time struggling with problems. If a man is having an emotional conflict with his wife, he will typically try to solve the crisis at the literal level by buying her something he thinks will make her smile again. When adolescents get depressed, they go to the mall or turn to drugs to heal their pain. Yet these quick fixes at the physical level never really work. When you shift your perception to a higher level, you can transform the myriad challenges you're facing in your emotional and physical worlds. You can understand that what you perceive as a problem in one sphere is actually an opportunity at the level above it. The loss of a job or a relationship becomes an opportunity to reinvent yourself, while an illness offers you the chance to not just try to eliminate your symptoms, but to also bring about deep healing and transformation. If you're sick, you can intervene at all four levels of perception. In serpent, you treat yourself with medicine. In jaguar, with psychology. In hummingbird, with meditation or spiritual practice. In eagle, with the awareness and wisdom of spirit. Shifting to a higher level of perception allows us to recognize that the reason we don't erect a dam that will make the darter snail extinct or destroy the habitat of the spotted owl is because they are representative of not just a few thousand animals, but of nature itself, which we must nurture and protect. We can then also begin to ask ourselves whether the hydroelectric power that a dam is going to produce to light up car dealerships at night is really even important. And at Eagle, we can understand the hidden interconnectedness of things and perceive the synchronistic nature of reality. We recognize that there are no accidents and that everything has a purpose and a meaning. A loss isn't as devastating because we know there's a context for it. So when loved ones pass away, we know that they don't cease to exist, but are simply God seeking another expression and form. All four perceptual states are helpful at different times. When you tumble down a ravine while hiking in an isolated area, you can go into serpent, let go of your fear, and access the resources of the reptilian brain to control the pain of your broken leg. Serpent, which is cold and indifferent and often associated with men in our culture, allows you to instinctively tend to your wound until you can crawl back to the trail and find help. In jaguar, which we often associate with women because it's intimate and emotional, you can process your feelings and experience your fear and vulnerability. Moving to hummingbird, you begin to see the big picture. You become aware of the connection between your broken leg and your heavy burdens, and you recognize that in order to heal yourself, you will have to be willing to let go of being in control all the time. And at the perspective of eagle, you can actually track along your future timeline and find a better outcome than dying alone in the woods, choosing a destiny in which help will find you. In eagle, you can recognize that the healing you need may not be just the mending of your body, but also of your soul, which longs to experience the lessons it came to learn on this earth, including why you injured yourself at that time and place. I have seen many students leave the path of the Earth Keeper as soon as they start feeling better physically and emotionally, because they've met their needs at the levels of Serpent and Jaguar. Yet, if they were perceiving from Hummingbird, they'd recognize that feeling better is nice, but evolving to their highest capabilities is even more important. And if they were perceiving with the eyes of Eagle, they would see that when they step into the fullness of their power, they can begin to dream their world into being, and that their own healing is directly tied to the healing of the entire planet. These students are like acorns beginning to sprout and pushing through the earth. And it's not much fun moving aside those mounds of dirt to get to the light. During the course of my own training, there were times when I wanted to stop my work and just take it easy. I wanted to remain at the level of Jaguar, where I was no longer bogged down by my problems or challenged or goaded to be the best I could be. But I recognized that in doing so, I'd miss the opportunity to grow my eagle wings. Another advantage to being able to shift your perception is that if you're fated to develop a deadly disease because it runs in your family's genes, you don't have to engage in it in the physical realm, where you'll actually develop the illness. At Hummingbird, you can prevent sickness by learning the lessons that it came to teach you. While at Eagle, you can clear the imprints in your luminous energy field that predispose you to this condition. If you have a book inside you that you have been struggling to write for 10 years, the great novel that will tell the story of my struggle, for example, you can bring it from the soul's domain into the literal realm and actually manifest that manuscript. Or, if you're caught arguing with your romantic partner in the perceptual level of Jaguar, and both of you are stuck believing that you are right, you can get beyond blame. You can perceive the situation as an opportunity to connect with each other, rather than as a chance to prove that you're correct and your partner is dead wrong. While we may be drawn to one particular perceptual state, for example, we may engage the world primarily through Jaguar and our emotions, we can learn to master all 4 levels with practice. Doing the following exercise will help you develop your ability to shift your perception. After you perform it a few times, you'll appreciate how the 4 levels are states that we gravitate to naturally, since they are the ways of sensing each of our 4 sub-brains.